So with a boy, it's 1 week and 33 days. With a girl, it's 2 weeks and 66 days. So you see a discrepancy here, right? You give birth to a boy, not so bad. All right, you know what? A woman is a woman, so she's gonna be a Nida, and we have to send her outside of the camp, and but she had a boy, so 33 days is enough. But if you have a girl, then you're really a problem. We're going to send you away for 66 days.
I think girls must be dirtier than boys.
Well, something's a problem, right? So it seems that what from what the world tells us about the Torah or Judaism being sexist, it certainly seems to be the case, does it not?
Yeah.
Right? So let's try to understand this. All right? And we're going to see an interesting point to show you why, when people read the Torah on a simple level, especially if they're looking to find problems, they're going to find them. And the reality is that's not a problem at all. Let's try to understand some basic rules. Rule number 1, let's talk about Thu May and Tahara. What is this? What is this thing that she's Thu May? So what is that? So usually they say that Thu May is dirty or unclean, and Tahara or Tahor is clean. It's a terrible translation because it has nothing to do with that. It's not like dirty and clean. Take a shower, you're clean. It's nothing to do with that. It has to do with a spiritual, there's a spiritual ability that people have, and sometimes they don't have it. It's the ability to accept certain spiritual things within your soul. When you're tahor, when you are clean, to use that poor word, then you are able to accept those things. So a Kohen can eat truma, right? He eats certain holy food. And a regular Jew can go into the temple, for example. When you're tahor. When you're not tahor, that means that you don't have the ability to receive this certain spiritual things. So then you are not allowed to go into the temple, and a Kohen can't eat the special food, and so forth. This is a better understanding of what it is. And the most severe form of tuma, of this uncleanliness, comes from being in contact with a dead body. It has nothing to do with good or bad. When you come in contact with a dead body, you're either in the room with the dead body, you go to a cemetery, you prepare someone for burial. While all of those are mitzvahs, they're good things, it causes the highest level of impurity, of this inability that there is. A body without a soul causes the highest level. A woman, when she menstruates, also has a level of this same inability to do certain spiritual things, but it's a much lower level. It's not as severe as when somebody comes in contact with the dead, right? So the one with the contact from the dead, the only way we can alleviate it is with the red heifer, the paraduma, which we don't have today. So that means really that every one of us in this world, from the moment you're born, are Thu May, based on the fact that somebody in your life was in contact with the dead, and now you're in contact with them. Like your mother went to a funeral. Your mother went to a cemetery sometime in her life. Now you are born, because you're coming out of the body of a person who's Thu May, you're Thu May. Right? So that's telling us basically that every Jew in the world is Thu May, right, at the highest possible level. So what causes this tuma? So the reason that we say that the highest level of tuma comes from a dead body is because the highest level of holiness comes from a living body, a human being. Right? Let's say a Jew has the potential for the greatest amount of spirituality over anyone else, because they have the ability to do mitzvahs. They have the ability to do things which have spiritual effect in the world. Right? When a person dies, you don't have that anymore. Your soul is gone. All that's left is a body. So we have an understanding that the more good you can do, then when that good is not being done, then the more evil can happen. Correct? So what happens is if a human body has a soul in it, and the soul is animating that body, it's alive. So while it's alive, it can do good things. When the soul leaves the body, it leaves behind a vacuum. The soul is gone. There's a vacuum inside the body. And there's no such thing as vacuums in the world. It gets filled with something. What fills the place? Tuma. This uncleanliness thing, right, which is not a good word for it. It fills the space where the soul was. So therefore, if you come in contact with that body, you will now grab some of that from the body, because it has become now what was the greatest potential for good has now become the least, because the soul is gone. right? Therefore, it'll affect you and me that we'll have that level of Thu May. Okay? Now, so that explains to us what does it mean when somebody is Thu May. That means that that there was holiness. For some reason, the holiness is dissipated. It's not a judgment, good or bad. It could dissipate for many reasons. So someone dies, they didn't do anything wrong, they just died, right? It's not good or bad. But by the fact that they're dead, the potential they had to grow spiritually is no longer there because they're dead. Therefore, that's filled with Thu May. When we come in contact with that, we become Thu May as well until we are able to get past that. Okay? So the lack of the ability for spirituality causes the ability for Thu May. And the greater the potential for spirituality, the greater the strength of the Thu May. Right? So the highest level of spirituality comes from a human being. The death of a human being causes the highest level of Thu May. Okay? That's a rule in the laws of Thu May, which aren't so applicable today. Right? As I said, because we're all Thu May. That's part one. Now, when a woman gives birth, well, what does she have? When a woman is pregnant, let's say, what does she have? She has her soul, right? She's a living person. And she has also a body inside of her with its own soul, right? So when a woman she's pregnant, she has two souls, right? The body inside of her and her own soul. She's a creator. A woman is a creator. She's creating someone. When she gives birth to that child, so that leaves her, that soul leaves her and goes out on its own. Right? It's now a baby. It's not inside of her anymore. So what's left behind is a vacuum. Just like a body losing its soul is a vacuum. So what fills that vacuum? Thu May. Right? However, the amount of Thu May is less because it's not like a dead body. She's alive, but there's less life within her because that baby is out. It's not a judgment, good or bad. It's bad to be Thu May, it's good to be Torah. It's not good or bad. It's just the reality. You have blue eyes, you have brown eyes. Because this woman gave birth, so now when her womb becomes empty, it becomes filled with Thu May. By becoming filled with Thu May, she has to sit like a nida, right? That's what happens. She separates herself until she can go to the mikvah, because it's a lower level of Thu May, and a mikvah can fix that type of Thu May, and she becomes able to go into the temple again, right? So that's what happens when a woman gives birth. Now the Torah is telling us that there is a difference when the woman gives birth to a male and when a woman gives birth to a female. The Torah is telling us. Why? How do we know? Because with the male, she sits 33 days. With the female, she sits 66 days. So clearly the Torah is telling you, good or bad, there's a difference. So what is the difference? Is it that the woman sits as a nida for longer, means that she's penalized for having a girl, and she sits less for a boy, that means that she's rewarded for having the boy? Well, based on what we just studied, it's actually the opposite. Because the greater the potential for spirituality, right, when that leaves, the greater the Thu May is left behind. The greatest amount of Thu May comes from the loss of life of a human being. The lowest level of Thu May comes from what? That's from menstruation. Why is menstruation caused Thu May? Because within the woman, there was an egg. Right? There was an egg. And when a woman bleeds, what is that? That's the egg dying, right? The egg loses its ability to create because it wasn't fertilized, and it becomes old, and it comes out. It turns into blood. So what was the potential to create a human being, right? She had the potential to create a human being. She had an egg, but all she needed now was the male, but she had the potential. That potential becomes failed. She didn't have the child, right? By her not having that child, then the blood comes out. So what happens is the potential to have that child has a spiritual ability. When the egg dies and it comes out of her, so that spiritual ability is gone. So what fills its place? Thu May, right? So when a woman gives birth to a boy, so the potential that she had within her is gone, so it gets filled with Thu May. When a woman gives birth to a girl, it's a different story. When a woman gives birth to a girl, what you have then is you have a woman who's giving birth to a creator. So because who really has the children? The men facilitate it, but the women are the ones who have the children, right? So a woman is a creator. A woman is a creator. A man is not a creator. A man is involved in creation, but the woman is the creator. So when a woman gives birth to a boy, So then when that boy leaves her body, Tuma comes in. When a woman gives birth to a girl, she's giving birth to a creator, to someone who also can fill her womb with life. And therefore when that child is born, the amount of Tuma is greater because the birth of the girl was a greater potential for spirituality. So the reality is that when the woman gives birth to a girl, the fact that you know that that's considered by the Torah to be even more spiritual than the boy is because the amount of Tuma that she has is greater than in the boy. Because the more Tuma you have, the more potential there was. So therefore, the woman has greater Tuma from giving birth to a girl because there's greater potential because the girl is a creator. And if she gives birth to a boy, the boy's not a creator. The boy has potential. He has a neshama, he has potential. But it's only 33 days that she's tummy. With the girl, it's twice as long because she's giving birth to somebody who also can give birth. So now it's 66 days. So it's actually showing you a positive thing. You actually see this in the Torah itself. I'm not just making it up. When you go back to the story of Adam and Eve, so the first person ever born in the world, the first person born to a woman, right? Adam and Eve weren't born they didn't have mothers. They didn't have a woman, right, carry them. The first child who was carried by a mother was Cain. That was the first one. When Chava, or Eve, gives birth to Cain, she says, Kanisi Isha Es Elokim. That means that she explains, why do I name him Cain, or Cain in English? Why did I name him Cain? Because she says, Kanisi Isha Es Elokim. I have created a man as God. Just like God creates people, I created people. I am godlike. That's what she's saying. I am godlike. And this is the result. This child is the result of my being godlike. That is to say, a woman, as a creator, is godlike simply because of who she is. When she's pregnant, she's even more godlike. She's in the process of creation. When she gives birth, she's even more godlike. The more godlike she is, the more Tuma will come in when it stops. And therefore, when she creates a boy, she has Tuma. When she creates a girl, she's creating a creator who is more godlike, and therefore there's more potential for spirituality, and therefore the Tuma left behind is greater. So therefore it's not a penalty that the woman sits Shiva, she sits as a Nida for twice as long when she gives birth to to a girl, as when she gives birth to a boy. It actually shows you a positive, not a negative. It shows you that according to the Torah, the innate potential in a woman, I don't mean an individual woman, every woman is different and every man is different, but the innate potential within woman is innately greater than within man. Not that a man can't be more spiritual than a woman, it's possible, but innately, that is with no effort. A woman who does absolutely nothing has a greater spiritual potential than a man who does nothing, because she is a creator and a man is not. And therefore, by the virtue of that fact that she becomes godlike by creating, she has a greater potential for spirituality, and therefore she has a greater potential for the opposite when that spirituality is not fulfilled, right? When she doesn't fulfill her potential. So the opposite is what happens. That's why when a woman menstruates and the egg, which was potential to create a baby, dies, she becomes a Nida. Because, she becomes Thu because that potential to bring that child into the world, which would make the woman godlike, was not fulfilled. And again, it's not a judgment. It's not like the woman didn't fulfill it because she didn't want to. It didn't get fulfilled for whatever reason. It wasn't fulfilled. A woman's not going to give birth every month. Right? It's not going to happen. But the potential is there. So that's really what it's saying. So this is an example where you see that those people who want to be critical of the Torah will be critical of the Torah, and they're ignorant. They read this and they say, look how sexist the Torah is. It makes a woman has to exclude herself from the community for twice as long because she gives birth to a girl instead of a boy. You see how they are? If it was a boy, they wouldn't do that to her. And it's really just the opposite. It's showing you that when a woman gives birth to a girl, there is an innate greater spiritual potential than there is when she gives birth to a boy. And that's why the Nida is longer. It's the opposite of what they want you to believe. It's no different than the people who read the Torah and it says, an eye for an eye, right? A hand for a hand, a leg for a leg. You say, that's horrible. That's justice. Like if I go and I injure somebody, so and I hurt his hand that he can't do something with his hand, so they come and they cut off my hand. That makes no sense. That's barbarism. It's like pre-justice. How can you live that way? But that's not what the Torah means. Right? When the Torah says nefesh tachas nefesh, a soul for a soul, and yad tachas yad, and shein tachas shein, tooth for a tooth. Right? It doesn't mean that if you knock out someone's tooth, the Torah says that someone should knock out your tooth. How does that help anything? How does that cause justice in the world? That's not it at all. What it means is that if I willfully and knowledgeably knock out somebody's tooth, I have to pay him his loss. I have to pay. I have to pay for a tooth because I knocked out a tooth. That's what it means, tooth for tooth. Not literally, I'm not going to take out my tooth because I knocked out his tooth. That's going to make him feel better? That's ridiculous. It doesn't do anything. Instead, let's say he was an actor, and the way his teeth look is an important part of his job. And because he doesn't have that anymore, because I knocked out his tooth or I broke his nose, right, and isn't so handsome anymore, I have to pay for that. I'm responsible for that. So that's what it means. Leg for a leg, arm for an arm, tooth for a tooth. It means you are responsible for what you do, and you have repercussions for your actions, and you have to pay. It doesn't mean literally cut off your arm. There's no basis for that. That's why people who want to attack the Torah will attack the Torah, and they'll attack it in these ways, and they look stupid. Because anybody who studies Torah knows it's not what they're saying. But they think they're such know-it-alls that they just read the words in English, and they think that's what it really means, and that's the depth of it. And the Torah is simple and made by a bunch of fools. So they think that that's all they have to do. And here we see an example in this week's Parsha that all of the feminists back in the early 70s that I used to read, all of these feminists all use this example to show that Judaism, like every other religion, is sexist, is anti-woman. It doesn't allow women to do things, right? And that's simply not the case. It's just not the case. And that's what we see here. Because you see, just to go on with this a bit, the Torah, and a difference between the Torah and the society we live in is the society we live in has trouble understanding how you could have something different, but it's equal. They get confused between same and equal. For instance, you say that men and women are not the same. They're not the same. They're not the same physically. There's certainly differences emotionally. There's differences in many ways between men and women. That's not to say that there's a particular woman who might be more masculine in how she acts. Sure, and a man can be more feminine. But the stereotypical woman has different than the stereotypical man. And certainly every woman is physically different than every man. Right? But we say spiritually and emotionally there's a difference. But the world that we live in here in Canada immediately presumes that if I say that there's a difference between men and women, then I say that one is better than the other. If there's a difference, then one's got to be better, one's worse. That's how the world looks at it. So therefore, they say because they're not the same, they believe I'm saying they're not equal. And I'm not saying that at all. I don't say that women are not equal to men. They are equal to men in their potential, in their abilities, in many, many ways. But they're not the same as men. The problem is in the society we live in, they can't see that concept. Like in America, they used to have a rule when after they had all this racism in the South, right, with the blacks and so forth. So they said they weren't allowed to be racist because it's against the law. So the governments came and they said, you have to educate blacks and you have to educate whites. You have to educate everyone who lives there. You've got to pay for schools. So they decided, okay, we're going to pay for schools, but we're going to have black schools and we're going to have white schools. And we're going to have, the schools are going to be separate but equal. You're going to have a school for blacks, you're going to have a school for whites. Right? We'll segregate them. And America eventually came and says, you can't do that. They said, you have to integrate them. You have to put blacks and whites together. But what was wrong with having a school for blacks and a school for whites? Why is that wrong? Why did the government not like it? Because the government could not distinguish between separate but equal. They said it's not possible to be separate and equal. And the way that it was done, it wasn't possible, because they were saying that the blacks live in the poor area, the whites live in a rich area, so the whites pay more taxes, right? The blacks pay less taxes, so there's less money for schools in the black area than there's in the white area. So you can say they're separate, but they're certainly not equal, because the white area's got one teacher for every 10 kids. The black area's got one teacher for every 40 kids. Big difference. Right? So therefore the American government, for instance, said you can't have separate but equal. But as Jews, we say you can have separate but equal, but not the way they did it. When they did it, that was racism. That was just another word for racism. We don't want blacks in school with our kids, so we make a separate school. That was their goal. We're not saying that. We're saying that men and women, Jews and non-Jews, weekdays and Shabbos, right, are different. There is differences. There are differences between people, differences between genders, differences between religions. There are differences. But it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. In no way does it tell you that women are better than men, or men are better than women innately, that Jews are better than non-Jews innately. We have no such belief. Right? We believe we're different, but not that we're better. In the case here with where the woman gives birth first to a boy and then to a girl, and there's a difference in how when she's allowed back into the community, it's presumed that we're saying, well, it's different, so it must be that the men are better, because to have a boy, you only have to sit outside 33 days. To have a girl, you have to sit outside 66 days, so therefore it must be worse to have a girl. That's not the case at all. We say you can be separate. Boys are this way, girls are this way. A woman gives birth to a girl, she's on there was greater potential, so there's greater tuma. If she gives birth to a boy, there's less potential, less tuma. It's not only is that separate, can you have separate and equal, but you can have separate and equal, and even the one that appears to be the underdog actually has greater abilities, even though they're equal. Right? So that's really what the Torah is telling us here, and it's very radically different than the society we live in. It really is. And the society we live in, it is perfectly logical to have a washroom for men and women, because to have separate washrooms for men and women would not be equal, because it's separate. Right? And here in Canada, that would be they would want you should have one washroom. The problem is people are human. Right? We don't want to use one washroom, and we don't want that. And people are criminal, and people do things that are wrong, and people are sick, and they do things that are inappropriate. But you have to provide equal washrooms for women as for men. Right now, and that you can do, but that's only if you believe that you can have separate and equal. Most of the society we live in doesn't, but we do. And that's a big difference. Judaism is based on the idea that different genders, different ages, different everything makes a difference. And even in our society, they do it. They just don't acknowledge it. For instance, if you live in Canada, you're 18 years old, you can't buy liquor. When you're 19 years old, you can. When you're 16 years old, you can drive a car, and 15 you can't. So the Canadian government are ageist. They are persecuting, and they are biased against young people, because you have to be older to drink. Right? So that's what it seems, right? They're ageist. They are against young people. Now, of course, that's not true. You know that's not true, but they're making a judgment based on age. So if you want to tell me I can't make a judgment based on gender, well, the Canadian government does it. They make it. They recognize men and women as being different. You want to go to the army? Until recently, a woman couldn't fight in the army. She came to the army. She was a secretary. She was an assistant. She was a truck driver. She didn't fight. Right? Because women and men are different. Right? When you want to play sports, how many women are in the National Basketball Association? None. You can't. Only men. You have a Women's Basketball Association. How can you have a women's and men's separate? Are they equal? They would say it can't be. So here you see that the government that we have, the society we live in, does distinguish. The word we use is discriminate. Between the sexes, between ages, between backgrounds. They discriminate all the time, but discrimination is not bad. Discrimination for bad reasons is bad, but to discriminate, we all do it. Right? We all understand. That's how you make a judgment. So here the Torah is showing us how that there is a difference between boys and girls, and men and women. But it doesn't mean that one is innately better than the other. It means that one's potential and one's abilities and the makeup of a person is different. But you never will you find the Torah saying that a non-Jew is worse than a Jew. You'll never see the Torah saying that a woman is worse than a man. You'll never see it saying that a child is worse than an adult. But yet you see that it does distinguish. It just doesn't give a hierarchy of better and worse and excellent. And that's what this parsha is telling us. So it's just an important point, because most people don't understand that. Now, we begin starting on the next page and going for the next 50 pages, so we don't really need to look at it as closely, to see the question of what's called tsaras. Now, tsaras, there's no question it is similar to the English word psoriasis, and that it's similar. It's a tsaras. Tsaras is a spiritual what?
And Tzoras?
Sorry, no question. Is it tsaras also meaning trouble? Tsaras is a spiritual illness, and it is the what do you say? It's the ailment. It's the actual byproduct of this illness, and that it means really a spot. A person talks lashon hara, for instance, and they keep doing it. Eventually, they'll have a spot on their skin, like a wart, something on their skin will show up, and there'll be no medical reason for it. It's got nothing to do with cancer, nothing to do with not washing, nothing with eating too much chocolate. It's just something shows up, and they would go to the Kohen, and the Kohen would decipher it. He would say what it is, right? He'd explain. Just like a doctor explains, the Kohen would say, if that is tsaras or it's not tsaras, go to a doctor. You have something else, right? The doctor should see this. But if it was tsaras, the Kohen would define it. You would know what to do, and it would go away. So here's the idea. In general, tsaras happens because of lashon hara. There's a few reasons. One is also for being stingy. There's another one being small-minded. But in general, lashon hara is the most famous example. If a person talks lashon hara, the first thing the Torah says that happens is that there's a spot will appear inside their house on one of the walls. A spot for no reason. Your house is white, suddenly you got a red spot. You got it on the inside of your house. And you don't know what it is. So you have to go to the Kohen and you say to the Kohen, look, I got this spot in my house. Kohen says, you talk lashon hara. You only get that spot if you talk bad about people. So you have that spot. So what do you have to do? It says you have to destroy the house. You take all of your stuff out of the house. Everything out of the house, so your stuff doesn't get destroyed. Then you take the house apart, like piece by piece. You can put it back together if you want, but if you get this tsaras, the rule is you have to take it apart. After you take it apart, right, you want to put it back together, you can. You want to build a new house, whatever you want to do, you can do, and put your stuff back in. Now let's say that, okay, fine, you went to the Kohen and you did that, and now your house doesn't have tsaras, and you go and you talk lashon hara again. What happens next is that there's a spot shows up on your nice new outfit, on your suit. And you're wearing your suit, suddenly wearing this nice blue suit, and suddenly a green spot shows up on my suit. Now, where does it come from? I wasn't eating anything green. It's not a stain. So I go to the Kohen. The Kohen says, you're still talking lashon hara. If you don't stop, it's going to get worse. So I have to take the clothing and I have to destroy them. But now I don't listen. I'm still talking lashon hara. Next thing I wake up, there's a spot on my arm, on me. I have a spot on my body. And I ask the doctor, no reason for this. Go to the Kohen. The Kohen says, you're still talking lashon hara, aren't you? You're not listening. So God is moving it up, right? He's letting you know. You don't listen to God when he whispers, said he'll talk out loud. You don't listen when he talks out loud, he's going to start yelling at you. And now you got to the point where you got the spot on your body. Now you have to go through this whole process to get rid of it, and you better stop talking lashon hara. And that's tsaras. So it's called a nega tsaras. Nega means the spot, and tsaras is what it is. Right? So that's what would happen. Today we don't have this. It's a spiritual disease. We're on such a low level today that it doesn't happen anymore. But it will happen again, and it did happen. And throughout history we had these things. And a person who gets these. So there are many issues to discuss. First thing is, there's a very famous Medrash and Talmud that says that when a person would get this tsaras, and they would be told by the Kohen that tsaras is on your house, you have to take your house apart. So the first thing is they have to take all of their stuff out of the house and put it in the street, and then tear apart their house. So it says that when they would tear apart the house, they would very often find treasures in the house. Because what used to happen in the old days is the Canaanites, the people who lived in Canaan before the Jews came, they knew the Jews were coming. And God gave the Jews the land, so they knew they were going to lose the land. So they got so they did is they were afraid. They took all of their gold and their silver and they buried it in the walls of their houses, so that one day they could come back and get it. Well, they never did come back and get it, and it was inside the walls of the houses which the Jews were living in now. And they had no idea what's in the walls of their houses. So this guy goes and so listen to this funny thing. The guy goes and he sins. He talks lashon hara. And when he talks lashon hara, there's a spot on his house. The Kohen comes and says, take all your stuff out of the house, take your house apart. You sinned. This is your punishment. You'll get rid of it when you do what I told you. He takes it out and he finds $1 million inside. What kind of a punishment is that? Well, that's a punishment? It doesn't make sense, right? So let's try to understand this part and then we'll go on with it. So when you find the tsaras in your house on the wall and you find this, you take it apart. So first thing, let's understand. Just to go off the topic a bit, but to show you, there's 2 places in the Torah that talks about what we call the tochacha, the reprimands. When God says, if you don't do what I want you, then this will happen, and this will happen, all these terrible things. There's 2 times in the Torah. One of them at the end has words of consolation. And then you will repent, and I will bring you to the land, and you will have all of the goodness of the world. Right? The other one doesn't. And the other one, it doesn't have anything in there about a consolation. It just says, this is going to happen to you if you don't follow the word of God. And ends. So the commentaries say that the one that has the consolation at the end it's a much better one. Because what that's basically telling you is that it says that God is going to punish you. Right? So, you have kids. If a kid has a parent and they're always upset because the parents have to punish them. They have to guide them. A kid doesn't go to school, a kid doesn't do his homework, a kid is rude to his siblings, a kid steals, whatever it is a kid does. It's the parents' job to make sure that they stop doing it and they're educated how to act, right? What to do. So they know that they have a parent. Now when you punish your kids, no matter what they say, they know that you're punishing them for their own good. You're not punishing them because you want to punish them. You're not punishing because I need to find an excuse to punish them. You're punishing them because they're supposed to be nice to their siblings and they're not. They're rude. So you punish them, so that's a way of teaching them that they better do it. You've done it, you've warned them, whatever it is. Eventually you do some kind of a punishment. I mean, the truth is that child appreciates knowing that the punishment that they're getting is because their parents love them. Because if you didn't love them, they wouldn't punish them. Like, I'm not going to go punish some kid I don't know. Right? I see a kid who's doing well, I'm not going to punish him. Right? Because I don't have that feeling of love for him. It's sad that I don't, perhaps, but I don't have that feeling. If I really had that feeling of love, I'd want him to do only what's good for him. Right? But I'll say, you know what, let his father deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it. Right? Why? So therefore, a kid knows that when their mother or their father punishes them for doing something wrong, it's because they love them. And that's a consolation. That makes them feel better. Because they know that my father or my mother is punishing me because they love me and they want me to have a good life. Not they're just punishing me because they want me to be in pain. They're doing it because they want me to have a good life. And it's the same idea here. When a person talks Lashon Hora, it says that, and he can go to the Kohen. It doesn't say he has to go to the Kohen. It says he can go to the Kohen. If you look at the words, it doesn't say that. Later on, when he gets it on his body, it says he has to be brought to the Kohen. In other words, if he wants to come or not, he's going. Because he's already got it on his body. When it's on his house, it isn't. Why? Because you've got 2 more steps. Now, if the guy keeps talking Lashon Hora, then it'll go on his clothes, then it'll go on him. Right? So if this person goes to the Kohen on his own free will, because he has a spot in his house, and he has to take everything out of his house, right? Which is not so easy. And then he has to tear apart his house, piece by piece, which isn't so easy. He's going to repent. He's not going to do this anymore. And therefore, the fact that the person, on their own volition, read the message, God sent them a message, you got the spot, you better fix what you're doing. He heard the message, he took it to heart, and he did something about it. So God says, because I punished you, I gave you trust because you were doing wrong. But you learned your lesson. Right? You learned your lesson. You went to the Kohen, you found out what was wrong, you realized I can't talk Lashon Hora anymore, so I'm going to reward you. Because you did, right? If I'm punishing you because I love you, then when you're doing what's right, because I love you, I'm going to do something good for you. So God says, you're about to go and tear apart your house because you spoke Lashon Hora and you're not going to do it anymore, so then I'm going to have you find a prize in your house. You're going to find a reward. You're going to find money in your house. And that's why they did it. Because the act of tearing apart one's house is such a big deal that that person is repenting. They're not going to do this again. You're not going to tear apart my house again next week. That's it, I'm done. But if he keeps doing it, then it gets worse. Then there's no reward. The reward is because when your child comes home with an F, you punish them. When they come home with an A, you don't punish them. If you're a good parent, you'll do something good for them to reinforce it, so they'll do good. Right? That's what's happening here. You talk Lashon Hora, you insult one of God's children, God's going to put a spot in your house. Oh, you committed to not do it anymore? So I'm going to give you something. I'm going to reward you. That's why they find it there. That's in the next point. Another interesting point is that when it talks here about the whole idea of tzaras, it uses a funny word for the person, and it says a person who finds a spot on his house, a person who finds a spot on his clothes, a person who finds a spot on his body, right? So what word for person do they use? So usually you'd say ish. Ish means a man, right? Here it means the man. It could be a woman, but it uses the masculine. It says a man. But it doesn't say that. In this case, it uses a different word for a man. It calls him Adam. And we know Adam is also a man, right? Adam was the name of the first man. So when I call another person Adam, I'm calling him Ben Adam. It's not a man. He's a man. But if I call him an Ish, it also is a man. Ish is really gender, right? Ish is like male, female, and Adam means a man. It doesn't mean a male, right? A male happens to be a man, but it's referring to something else about him. When this parsha that talks about getting tzaras calls the person an Adam, so an Adam is a very unique word. First thing, is one of the only words in Hebrew that has no plural. You have no plural. You can't say you have man and you have men. So you say a man is Adam, and what are men? Adamim, Adamiot. Well, what is it? There's no word. The word Adam has no plural. Just like Mayim has no plural, water has no plural. Right? The same word, water is already a plural word. But Adam has no plural. And that teaches us an important lesson. And this is the lesson that came up actually in the early 1900s. You might remember the Bilis blood libel. It was a famous blood libel. It was in all the newspapers, and they made a movie about it, where this guy named Mendel Bilis, B-E-I-L-U-S, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, because I never heard it, I only read it. He was arrested by the government that he was using Christian blood to make matzah. And they put him on trial, right? And they were going to kill him. And what it really was a trial against Judaism. But they were using this guy, and they would have killed him. So the lawyer was a secular lawyer, a Jewish lawyer, who was defending him. And he came to the conclusion that the prosecution is attacking Judaism, but they're using him as the scapegoat. And they'll kill him because they really hate Judaism. So they're going to ask questions about Judaism more so than they ask about this guy. Because they say the Jews use Christian blood, not just this Jew, all Jews use Christian blood to make matzah, which is of course unequivocally false. But they wanted to prove it. So they would ask him all kinds of questions, right, based on Judaism that were misleading, like stuff we talked about at the beginning. So one of the things that he knew they were going to ask him is a famous piece of Talmud, and it says Yisrael korim Adam, ve'ein umas ha'olam korim Adam. The Jewish people are called Adam, man, right? But the nations of the world are not called Adam, man. So how does the non-Jews then in this trial believe that means? It means that Jews are human. Non-Jews are not human. Jews are called man. Non-Jews are not called man. Right? That's what it sounds like. So they wanted to raise this at the trial and to say, you see, you Jews don't even care about us. We're not even human to you. You'll kill us. You'll use our blood for matzah because you don't think we're human. You think we're subhuman. Your own Talmud says it. And it sounds like it, right? Mm-hmm. Jews are called man. Non-Jews are not called man. But so they went and they spoke to a scholar. The lawyer went and spoke to a scholar and asked him, how do I answer this? We know it's not true. So how do we answer this Talmud? It sounds pretty damning, right? So he says, if a Frenchman gets arrested, right? Let's say a Frenchman is traveling in Morocco, gets arrested in Morocco. Do Frenchmen around the world all go to church and pray and cry and do whatever they can to try to get him out? No, they don't. They have no relationship with him. I don't know him. What do I got to do with me? An Irishman gets arrested, do all the Irish people in the world start crying and giving charity and going to church to try to get him saved? Yeah, they don't. They don't do that. Why? Nothing wrong with it. But everybody's an individual. I am me. I have a family. I'm taking care of my family. I don't need to take care of every Irishman. Right? Take care of my family. But a Jew, if one Jew gets arrested, no matter where it is in the world, all Jews feel it. All Jews feel it. All Jews know it. All Jews try to do something about it. Right? No matter who that Jew was, how despicable he was, how good he was, we feel a responsibility to other Jews, right? That's what it means by Adam. The difference between Ish, meaning man or male, and Adam, meaning man, is that Adam, the word Adam, has no plural, because it already is plural. It means all of the Jewish people are one, right? All Jewish people, we all came from Adam. We're his offspring. When you look at the Jewish people are one. When you cut a Jew and he bleeds in Morocco, the Jews in Canada feel it. Right? That's how we are.
Make sure that computer is printing to the upstairs printer. Thank you.
So we feel that we have this feeling that we're one, right? That's what Adam means. Adam is a word that means all of us are one. That's what it, right? That's why there's no plural of the world, because you can't have all of us plural. All of us already are plural. We are one. All Jews are one. All Jews feel the pain of each other Jew, every other Jew. But the rest of the world doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with that. They just don't. Every Englishman does not feel for every Englishman. If an Englishman is traveling through India and he gets arrested, an Englishman in Manchester is not going to go and pray for him. He doesn't know him. It means nothing to him, just because he's English. In our case, because he's Jewish, we do. So when we say Jews are called Adam, the nations of the world are not called Adam, it doesn't mean Jews are human, the rest of the world's not human. It means Jews are all in it together as one. We're all one. We are Adam. We are the plural, the singular plural. We are a singular plurality. That all Jews are one, and every one of us is all Jews. Right? I am all Jews, and all Jews are a part of me. That's how we all look at ourselves. Anytime a Jew's in trouble, we're there. We're called Adam. But the rest of the world, they're not called Adam, because they're called Ish. They're a man. I'm for myself. I take care of my family. I'm a good, responsible, caring, loving man, but I'm not interested in every American who got arrested in Afghanistan, so I have to feel bad here. Oh, look, he'll take care of himself. I'm taking care of myself. That's called Ish. So that's what it means. Here, it says Adam, an Adam who sees a spot. You'd say, wait a minute. The Parsha is telling us, is using the word in Hebrew for a person. It should say Ish, right? A man, a male who sees a spot on his house, right? Because he spoke Lashon Hora. Because you're talking about a guy who talks Lashon Hora. He's not like a great person, right? Talks Lashon Hora. But he uses the word Adam, which means the great person who cares for everybody, right? So why does it use that word? The Torah should use the word Ish, which is more appropriate. And the point is that what is the sin that causes the spot is Lashon Hora. What does Lashon Hora do? Lashon Hora is divisive. What it does is that I will speak about one of you to other people, and they're going to not like you because of how I speak about you. They're going to think that you're crazy, or that you're not nice, or there's something wrong with you, because I'm talking to them about you, right? That's called Lashon Hora. You're not allowed to do that. Talk badly about somebody like that. But what I'm doing is I'm being divisive. I'm causing fights among Jews. Now, because I told all of you about the person over here who's not so nice, now when you see that person, you're not going to be nice to them, because the rabbi said they're not so nice. I was Lashon Hora. I shouldn't say such a thing, because now your judgment of that person is that they're not nice. You're no longer Adam. We're no longer all for one. We're all for one except for him, right? That's not Adam. Therefore, the Torah is telling us, you want to remain Adam, then don't talk Lashon Hora. But if you talk Lashon Hora, then you are going to cause that the whole idea of being an Adam, of being all for one, is going to be destroyed. It's not going to exist anymore, because you became divisive and you caused that fight. And therefore, you have to ruin your house. Well, how does that work? So I told you before that one of the reasons that a person gets this spot in their house is not only for talking Lashon Hora, but for being small-minded. A small-minded person is a person who's always critical of everyone else, but not of themselves. Right? That also happens to be the kind of person who talks Lashon Hora. Right? Thinks everybody else is worthy of Lashon Hora, and I'm the only one who's perfect. Right? Such a person, right, is also small-minded. When a person is small-minded, that is, they're stingy. They don't want to give away their money. They don't want to give away their time. They don't want to share themselves with other people. That kind of a person who is so critical of others and doesn't want to be a part of lives of others and doesn't want to share, it's a detriment. It's a bad thing that people are like that. So what happens to the person who is like that and he gets a spot in his house? He has to take everything from his house and put it outside. So a person who is like that is the kind of person who doesn't want everyone to know what he's got. I got all this stuff, right? Because I'm great. I'm great, and I look down on you. And I've got beautiful stuff in my house. What is going to happen when I have to take apart my house? I got to put all of my stuff and put it in the front lawn. Now everybody knows exactly what I got. You know what's in my safe. You know what I hid under my bed. You know everything. It's just sitting on the lawn. So what it is that it's an attack on the problem that caused it. Why did the person get the spot? Because they're small-minded. They're argumentative. They're not nice to others. That person got the spot. What is the way to cure the spot? Is to take apart his house piece by piece after moving all of his stuff outside. Because you'd say to me, it's not, what kind of a punishment is it? He has to take apart his house, but he doesn't lose anything. Everything that's in his house he has to take out. Right? The answer is that now everybody knows his stuff. Everybody knows what he's got, what he doesn't have, what's in his bank account. You know everything. It's all out there. And that will help that person start doing right and no longer acting in this way. So that's one of the bases of it. So that's why the Torah says it's an Adam is the one who does this sin. Another thing is I'm just trying to find the right one. It says as follows. I'll just explain it because there's so much of this. The Kohen gets called by someone. Come on over. I woke up this morning. I found a spot on my skin. I need to know what it is. What is this nega? Right? The nega is the spot of tsaras. Is it tsaras? Is it not tsaras? He calls the Kohen to come over. The Kohen looks at it, right? And he tells him it's tsaras. And it says below hifach as eno. It doesn't change its eye. What does that mean? If the spot looks the same, right, at one point, and then Kohen comes later and he makes a judgment on it, and it still looks the same. The spot did not change. It didn't change his eye. It's a literal translation, but it means it didn't change. It's the same spot. So then it's Thu May. He's got to go through the process. He spoke Lashon Hara. It says, but it's a funny words. It says, instead of saying it didn't change, it says it didn't change its eye. It means change its eye. So, very interestingly, if you look in the word nega, which means the spot of tsaras, nega, is spelled nun gimel ayin, nega, right? There's another word that's spelled the same letters, but it's backwards. And that one is, well, it's not backwards, but it's reversed. And that is oneg. You've heard of an oneg Shabbos? Right? Oneg means joy. Right? Joy. You want to have joy on Shabbos, you have cake and cookies, right? Oneg means joy. Now, how you have joy from Shabbos. It's called oneg Shabbos. So the word nega and the word oneg are the same words. The difference in those two words is where you put the ayin, the letter ayin. Oneg has it in the beginning. Nega has it at the end. But otherwise it's the same word. Nega means a spot of this disease. Oneg means joy. The difference between the person who gets the spot because they're small-minded and the person who doesn't get the spot because they're not small-minded, instead they're full of joy, is where you put the ayin. Ayin in Hebrew also means eye. Right? A person's ayin is my eye, is my ayin. So when the Torah says lo hifach as the ayin, it didn't change the eye, literally means that the spot looks the same. It didn't change. But if you look at the words lo hifach as ayin, it means that the eye wasn't changed. That is, the ayin wasn't changed. It's still nega. It's still spot. But if you change the ayin, you make it into oneg, you're no longer small-minded, you're no longer critical of other people, you're no longer difficult. Then you move the ayin, it changes, the spot will change. And then it becomes oneg, joy, instead of nega, right, a spot. And that's an important difference between the two. So oneg and nega are very, very similar. The only difference is where you put your eye, right, where you put the ayin. So that's another point. Well, it looks like that'll be it for today, I think. So we've talked a bit about, we talked about birth, we talked about tsaras, we talked about nega. I think you got a pretty good look at the two parshas. So we had those, right, those two parshas, and then next week we start with Tazria-Metzora, which is more in the same kind of thing. We'll talk more about that next week. Okay? Nice to see everybody again.